Welcome back.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of It's Not What You Think. This is Rick.
And this is Darren.
And before we kicked into this week's theme, I wanted to review, because we've hit some really key moments in the music of history.
Yeah.
Or the history of music, even.
Mm-hmm.
The earliest evidence of a constructed musical instrument, the bone flute.
Yep.
You got that right here.
And that was what, 40,000 years BC?
Well, the
roughly?
the one we reviewed was 40,000. We had a whole CD of it.
Right.
But then we discovered, even previous to that, 50,000 BC, they had bone flutes even.
Right.
So who knows how far back it actually goes.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, there was a good, probably 50,000 years of music making.
Right. In some primitive way.
Yeah.
Rocks or whatever.
Yeah. That was incredible. We also have the oldest surviving musical notation, and that dates roughly about 1950 BC.
Which is fascinating because you've got those 75,000 years almost prior making primitive music, and then we were like, well, maybe we write it down.
Yeah.
So,
and not writing down, well, they probably wrote down the music and the music was lost, but we got how to tune the instrument to make sure that you're playing it accurately.
Exactly.
And then after that, the oldest surviving written melody in history, which was 1400 BC, the hymn to Nikal.
Right.
And that was written on stone. And then after that, we have the oldest surviving complete song, and that's the Epitaph of Sikylos.
Right.
And that was around 200 to 100 AD. And then the oldest known composer, we have the composer who wrote the hymn to Apollo, and his name was Limeneus. Remember that guy?
Yes.
Limeneus, son of Thoinos.
Right.
That was around 128 BC. Now, it's I think up in the air whether he was the first or Athenaeus was the first. They both wrote a hymn to Apollo, but the first hymn, they're not quite sure on the dating.
Right.
So the second hymn,
because the inscription.
Yeah. Right. So the second hymn, they know precisely what it was, and so either Athenaeus came before or after that guy, and they're not really sure. So one of those two guys is definitely the oldest surviving composer, or the oldest composer that we have surviving music.
Right.
And that brings us to today's episode, because today's episode, I think, is a landmark in the world of music as well. We have the Oxyrhynchus hymn, or the hymn of Oxyrhynchus. Oxyrhynchus is a place in Egypt, and they found a bunch of scrolls at an excavation site, and this was one of the hymns that they found there. And you might be wondering, well, if it's not the earliest melody and it's not the oldest song, then what's the significance? I'm glad you asked.
They asked.
It's the earliest known Christian hymn.
Aha.
And we have it. And it's, both lyrics and music.
Question. How many Christians do you think know that this thing exists? Right. How come it's not on every major newspaper?
I don't know.
So.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? I Googled it or went to YouTube, and I thought I'd get like 100 different versions of it. And it was only like 5. Yeah.
So even among the musical people,
yeah,
there's only about 5 people that know about this thing.
And you know, if you,
or at least with some interest to make their own.
Right. And they're recordings.
Right.
They're like, someone like a professional group like put it together. Like, have you ever just out of curiosity went onto YouTube and looked up like one of your favorite songs, and you'll invariably find high school groups doing it.
Yes.
And maybe just amateur bands, like garage bands doing it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even like churches, they'll have like a church choir singing even a popular song, like Toto's Africa or something like that.
Right.
Dude, none of that. Nobody decided, hey, let's do this just casually.
And the crazier part about that is, what are the dates on the Oxyrhynchus hymn?
Between 200 and 300 AD.
Right. So, as close to the time of Jesus as possible.
Yeah.
And as that we have historical record for,
Mm-hmm.
and people have ignored it.
Right.
In terms of Christian hymnals,
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly care. I used to sing hymns in church, but
sure.
I'm sure there are people out there that are really, really into Christianity,
I know.
and they don't know about this.
No. Well, hopefully our viewers will spread the word and tell all your friends, and that we have the first Christian hymn, the Oxyrhynchus hymn, and it's dated somewhere between 200 and 300, which is the theme of today's episode. 200 AD to 300 AD, we're going to explore the music that we can confidently say is written at this time period.
All
So let's listen to the Oxyrhynchus hymn.
Okay.
Both wearing black t-shirts. Actually, mine's charcoal. So, impressions.
It definitely sounds like a hymn.
Mm-hmm.
It ends with the word Amen.
Yeah.
So, which was pretty cool.
And it definitely sounds ancient.
It definitely sounds Greek. It definitely it follows that traditional pattern that we've seen where the strumming on, and it was a guitarra.
Right.
Are matching the syllables of what's being sung. So
right.
Very traditional. It sounds like the Greek modes. I could be wrong, but it sounds Greek. And it was okay. It was all right.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy, but certainly something that I wish I had known earlier.
Right.
Until now.
You bring up something that I had been thinking about. Singing. And each syllable and the music is accompanied with each syllable, like and I started thinking about that, and I think that makes sense when you're starting to play with a group of people, and you don't have a conductor yet. And so, how are you going to organize everybody staying together?
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably intuitively say, well, let's just do each syllable of our words, and that way everybody moves at the same pace.
Yeah,
And so I think that might be functional.
Well, and it's something that you see even today. I mean, the most common example that I can think of is the Strokes. Early Strokes music, the voice kind of matches the lead guitar, and they're almost pairing each other.
You went over my head. It's the Strokes. Is that the name of a band?
It's a band, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a band. They're huge right now.
Okay.
But in the early 2000s, when they were still kind of fresh, they were still. I'd say they haven't refined their music yet, but they do that same sort of pattern, where the voices would match the lead guitar in a lot of their songs.
Okay. Well, you introduced me to something brand new. I'll have to listen to them.
Oh, they're good. They're very good.
That'll be my homework.
All right. Things to come.
Yeah.
In terms of music being driven by liturgy as opposed to the other way around.
Right, and I think that's definitely gonna be what we're gonna see for the next couple hundred years.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to some more Greek stuff.
Right on. Okay, we just listened to 2 fragments from the ancient Greek, written somewhere around 200 to 300 AD.
Right.
The first one definitely had the aulos
Oof.
in the foreground, and a very raspy instrument.
It just sounds like a kazoo.
It does, I admit. And this particular piece, they didn't make any effort to dampen the buzzing quality. It came straight out.
Oh yeah. And I mean, if ever there was an instrument that could be used as an alarm clock, it's the aulos. So, I have to say that is nailed. That fragment was particularly nails on a chalkboard, except for the very, very exceptional use of the most primitive of instruments, the hands.
Yeah.
With the clapping.
The hand clapping.
Yes.
And that's even in the credits.
And
hand clapping and finger snapping.
Finger snapping, yes.
As part of the credits.
So that was
musical instruments.
Yes, that was an excellent display of musicianship on the hand clapping.
And I agree. I think it's probably the first musical instrument.
Yeah.
Would be your hands. And then after that, we listened to the dramatic fragment number 1, which featured some sort of flute, right?
Which I quite liked.
Yeah, it was actually really pretty.
It was a photinx, a Pandora, and a Cythera. Sorry, Greeks, I don't know your language.
I think the photinx is a stringed instrument, and the other one, the photora, must be the flute.
The flute
type instrument.
But yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
I thought it was nice. And we were talking while we were listening that it is, in my opinion, commonly the music that's commonly associated with like Renaissance fairs.
Yeah.
Which always kind of it strikes me now as ironic, and now as we were discussing it makes more sense that the Renaissance fair would choose music from antiquity to sort of create the environment. But it makes sense coming from the Renaissance, which was trying to come and revive some of those things from antiquity.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it makes sense, and which begs
and
the question.
even the paintings were focused on Greek mythology.
The paintings, the architecture, all of it was really kind of trying to come back to ancient Greek and I guess Rome to some extent, which begs the question now in my mind as I'm thinking about it. Do you think that some of the pieces that we got out of the Renaissance were actually based on pieces that we no longer have a history of?
Oh.
So maybe there's a papyrus that somebody knew that just, it's gone to history.
Right.
At some point in the Renaissance, they had known it because it was still in fairly good condition.
I understand what you're asking. So to modernize it, if I were to do a George Gershwin tune, 100 years from now, but the George Gershwin tune is lost,
right.
And I don't call it the George Gershwin tune because it's based on his tune,
right?
And I've malleated it to meet my own song.
Exactly. So perhaps we have more music than we think we do because it was revived in the Renaissance.
That's great. It
would be interesting if that were true. Quick Freya break. We'll be right back.
Come on in. So, I'm impressed. That's a really cool theory.
It would be interesting.
Yeah.
I will never know the truth, but
I know. But I think that's great. And
there's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up the idea that there's more music than we have previously, and I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that theory stands for the Renaissance, why not for the Sumerians? Why not the Sumerians have some record of some ancient tribal music that was passed down through oral traditions that, maybe has some influence in the hymns and Nakal, and so the hymns and Nakal's roots are actually tens of thousands of years older than what we actually have.
That's really neat.
So that would be, I mean, it's a theory. It's a working theory.
I like it.
But all in all, I mean, I think the Greek music that we just listened, the two pieces that we picked could not have been better to display the duality of the Greek music. Because anything that has an aulos in it, in my mind, is just, it's so awful. Because it's just nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
But the other side of Greek music is what we heard in Dramatic Fragment 1. I think that's what it's called. And it's just more soothing and kind of background, and you're not, it's not something that you're really picking up on. If it was playing right now, you know, I wouldn't even notice it. Yeah, it's kind of like white noise, but the aulos is just.
Well, you brought up a hypothesis one time in a previous episode that you thought the contrast was part of the emphasis of the musical instruments, and that the aulos, you know what they say, there's no white without black,
right?
And so the aulos gives the flute extra special sweetness.
It's true. It's kind of like flavors. You you want something to taste a little sweeter, put a little salt in it.
Yeah.
Because the salt draws out the sweetness. No, it makes sense.
It could be.
And I feel like that was a very common theme in Greek philosophy, Greek culture. So it doesn't surprise. It wouldn't surprise me that would also be present in Greek music.
Right. And it was also a new style of creating sound.
Yeah.
The reed, the vibration of a reed. And so someone, instead of saying, God, that sounds horrible, get rid of it, said, you know what, God, that sounds horrible, let's perfect it.
Let's refine it, yeah.
Let's refine it.
Yeah.
And it eventually became the reed instruments, the clarinet and the oboe. And,
right. Yeah, you're right. I guess I can't. I do like a good oboe solo from time to time. I guess I can't hate on the aulos as much as sort of the progenitor to the reed instruments.
I'm defending the instrument. I'm not defending the piece we heard.
Right.
Because the piece we heard was
Yeah, it just starts off with a just an obnoxious buzz, which I guess the Greeks like to drink too. I don't know.
Now, here's something really interesting. We set the stage, the ground for the Western music to come. We just said we have the introduction to the clarinet and the reed instruments.
Yep.
We have the flute and the wind instruments.
Yep.
We have keyboard instruments.
With the hydraulis, yep.
We have string instruments. And they disappear for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Well, or so the theory goes. I'm sure that there were other parts of the world that still maintained those systems of music making in some fashion.
It's just interesting that there's this, you would think right now, there's the launch pad for music and musical instrumentation and composing with music, and and maybe I'm overemphasizing that they're gone. Like you said, they probably still played them, but they weren't written down. Well, what survives is all vocal music for the next couple hundred years.
The thing that's so, although we have all of the, so as somebody who lives in statistics from time to time, there's the dichotomy in statistics where you have your quantitative models and your qualitative models. What we have here is the quantity. We've got everything that we need. We have the tangibles. What we don't have is the soul, right? We don't have, you think about the Greeks. The Greeks were heavily emphasizing the muses, right? They draw out, in fact, I think in the hymn to Apollo, it mentions the Muses. And Greeks were sort of obsessed with that as sort of a inspiration for making music. When we get to now, where we are, the inspiration for making music is Freya, but it's religious. So I think that, and it's ironic to say that music is missing its soul when we're talking about it becoming more religious at this point. But I think truly that is what is missed, and it's more because I think we've entered a time period in history where culture wasn't so important as conversion. Become Christian or die. Become Muslim or die. We're coming upon the Crusades at this point. We're a few hundred years away from the Crusades.
Right.
So
and Christianity is starting to become defined.
Yes.
And so whenever you define something, you have to really create contrast with what you're defining it against.
Right.
And so here you're starting to bring Christianity to the foreground, and you're wanting people to differentiate, move away from the pagans.
Right.
Well, the pagans used all those instruments in their music, so we're not going to have any in ours.
Right.
The pagans, they sang and danced outside. Well, we're not going to dance. We're just going to sit and sing inside our churches.
Right, with no instruments.
Yeah.
And you see that same process replicate in the 1950s when rock and roll is for the devil.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And we don't want that. It's all Jesus this and no, okay, fine, but you're missing a key component, and it's no surprise that the ultra conservative Christianity in America during the 1950s, 40s, 50s, and into the 60s spawned one of the greatest generations of music making in American history, which is in the 60s, where you end up with the Beatles and Elvis coming, even before the Beatles, and bands like Led Zeppelin following, and Pink Floyd coming out of England. It was very subversive, and it was subversive in a way that we haven't quite gotten to here, because I think when we get to the Renaissance, that's the first subversion of Christian music, because it's a recall to antiquity, and sort of ignoring what we've done over the last at that point it would be like 1,000 years,
right? Yeah.
And saying, well, what did we do before? This sounds better.
Yeah. Well, we're moving away from instrumental music and moving towards vocal music, specifically chanting. Chanting becomes now the major dominant musical force, primarily because the monks were the ones who can read and write.
Yeah.
They wrote all their hymns down, and they wrote all their music down, and so that's what survives.
Yeah.
And we have something from the Byzantine Empire, specifically written by St. Cosmas. St. Cosmas was one of two twin brothers who were born in the 3rd century A.D. They were Arabian brothers who embraced Christianity, practiced medicine, and surgery without a fee. And St. Cosmas was a composer, and he composed some chants. And so between the years of 200 and 300, we don't have a whole lot of music that we can confidently say, here's when it was written. We have a little bit of the Greek, and now we have some St. Cosmas. So let's listen to Cosmas.
Okay.
Anikso to stoma mu, que pliros issete pneumatos, que logo ne revxome ti Vasili Dimitri, que ofthissome Phedros panigyrison, que asogithomenos ταύτης τα θαύματα.
We listened to 2 tracks from St. Cosmas, Byzantine Easter, And that last one was him on Thursday.
Iudas odulos και δολίος, ο μαθητής και επίβουλος, ο φίλος και διαβολός, εκ των έργων απεφάνθη, οικολούθηγαρ το διδασκάλο και καθεαυτόν εμελέτησε την προδόσιαν, έλεγεν εν εαυτό, παραδώσω αυτόν και κερδίσω τα συνάχθεντα χρήματα. Επεζητεί δε και το μύρον πραθήνε και τον Ιησούν δολοκρατήθηνε, απέδωκεν ασπάσμον, παρέδωκεν τον Χριστόν και ως προβάτων επισφαγήν, ούτως οικολούθη ο μόνος εσπλαχνός και φιλάνθρωπος.
Holy Thursday?
Hymn for Holy Thursday. Yeah. Impressions?
I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it, and not because he's not a talented singer, not because it's not well written music. It's just boring. It's so there's no dimension, there's no dynamic. It's just the same thing the whole time. It's terrible.
Well, there's a wavering to the voice that I think makes me kind of waver in response, and I think what I'm literally saying is it makes me nervous.
So you know what my reaction was when I was thinking about this, and prepare yourself because it is out there.
Okay.
So St. Cosmas was a healer. Have you ever heard the theory that the purring of a cat, the vibrations of the purring of a cat are healing or therapeutic?
Mm-hmm.
What if he's writing these chants in a way to invoke a vibrational pattern, a frequency instead of a melody?
Well, it's not necessarily way out there because we've been talking about some of the ancient philosophers and what they conceptualize music as a healing force.
Right.
And whether it was vibration or whether it was the ratios, using the golden ratio as a healing force. And so, yeah, you're probably not too far from pinpointing.
Τμηθήσιτ μάτε, πόνατος ερυθρός κύματοτρόφος δεξιραίνεται βυθός. Ο αυτός ομού αόπλης γεγονός βατός και πανοπλήτες ταφός. Ο δίδε Θεοτερπής ανεμελπετώ, εν δόξος δε δόξαστε Χριστός ο Θεός ημών.
It stands to reason that, if you're trying to focus on music for a vibrational pattern and not for, the quality of it in your ear.
Right.
That, you want to feel the music.
Right.
That you would be chanting. You would be sort of monotonal,
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't really deviate too much from the scale that you've put yourself in.
Right.
And you would focus more on those long, drawn out,
Yeah.
and
again,
wavering.
Again, we get the concept that music is functional.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, what if that's his purpose here? What if he's trying to create music, he being St. Cosmos, create music that is vibrational, that you're feeling, instead of feeling on an emotional level from hearing it.
Os per ombros e pagros din Christe, que os sinifetos, iglicia iegone phoni, tis mathite suenti niptiri, tu thiu baptismatos, tin charin proem fenusa, que tapinos theos typon imin prohypografusa. Ierugin sita thea os theo alithi.
Yeah, that's a great hypothesis, and I think you're probably closer to hitting the mark than you realize.
I don't know about that, but it's certainly a thought.
You mentioned the cat purring, and I don't know if you saw my Cheshire Cat smile when you brought that up. A buddy of mine, his name is Dennis Bedard, and way back in grad school, he came up with an idea that each element has a particular vibration, and if we can translate that to sound, what would it sound like? And so he went through the periodic table, and he found the I don't know the science behind it, but he found like the frequency, and then he translated that to an audio frequency, and then came up with what the potential sound like if this were in the auditory spectrum, what would it sound like? This particular
like does helium sound like?
Right, exactly. Well, when he came to calcium, it sounded like a cat purring.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then afterwards we read in some journals that they were experimenting with. They believe that cats purring calcified their bones.
Helps the bones to heal faster.
Yeah. And then they were experimenting using cat purring vibrations for osteoporosis treatments.
Right.
And so that whole idea that vibration is healing, there's more than meets the eye to it.
I think so. I just don't know if St. Cosmos was as sophisticated as we are today in our understanding of vibrational patterns.
Optisan epigetis avisu notidos amiri que anecalipthi thalassis Hymenus ista themeria, ti categidi nevmati, tavtis gare petimisas, periusion laon desosas adonda, epinicion hymnon Kyrie.
He could have been. I know I've mentioned in the past that there's theories, ancient alien theories, that the pyramids were built by vibrational patterns.
Right. I heard that too.
Which I find to be, I think it's crazy, but it doesn't. I mean, it speaks to a level of understanding of vibrational patterns and frequencies that the ancients may have possessed, or at least in some way believed. That could have informed St. Cosmos in some way, if he was a healer.
Right.
He probably had heard about all these things.
Yeah, I agree.
But God, his music is terrible. From a purely aesthetic, I guess.
Which you know what? Whenever you get medicine, oh man, it tastes horrible, right?
That's right.
But you gotta suck it up and take it because it's good for you.
That's right.
Well, maybe that's the healing power of his chants. That they are just horrible to listen to.
Medicine for the soul.
Yes,
it
exactly.
tastes terrible in your ears, but it's good for you.
Yeah. I think we stumbled upon.
I think that's it. Well, they say that there's, I don't know the name of the studies. I've just heard that there are studies. So feel free to fact check the internet. That singing together with a group of people, it releases. It's a powerful therapy for depression. And people that sing together tend to be happy, and maybe there's something to it.
It's also energetic.
Yeah.
I read a study, and just like you said, you'd have to look it up because I don't know the exact references. But I remember reading a study where they had some monks who were chanting, and they were able to stay awake for 20 hours and get 4 hours of sleep. And then they got a new director in this one particular monastery, and he thought that there was too much chanting, so he backed off on the quantity of chanting, and they weren't able to sustain the amount of wake time anymore. Their energy levels dropped. And then they realized that it could be because they dropped a significant amount of their chanting, and then they reintroduced it again, and their energy levels came back up, and they were able to sustain 20-hour days.
Maybe there's something to it.
It could be.
Christos o ergomenos emphanos theos Simon, ixike uchroni exorus kataskiudas theos choris, tictus is apirandros profitis palefisi. Dio pandes vomen doxa ti dinamis su Kyrie.
So, that being said, if this is all true, then St. Cosmos' music is the greatest music that's never been heard.
And you heard it right here. So we heard probably the ends of ancient Greek music.
For now.
And we're moving into the world of chant. We heard Byzantine chant. As an overall arch, do you have any comments of today's episode?
Well, I think it's interesting that we opened with the Oxyrhynchus hymn, because the Oxyrhynchus hymn, in my opinion, is a good combination of the two pieces that we listened to afterwards. So the ancient Greek stuff,
the fragments,
and then the Byzantine chanting, because the Byzantine chanting is much more derived in Christianity. It's they're obviously talking about Holy Thursday, Good Friday, all those things. And then the Oxyrhynchus hymn takes that vocal melody, or not melody, but that vocal inspiration from Christianity, but puts it to ancient Greek music, which is what we heard in the fragments.
Right.
So it was interesting that we started this episode with what ultimately is the combination of the latter two pieces, and it's unfortunate that we're going to lose the music in favor of the faith for the next few hundred years, until what will be called classical music.
Well, that was the driving force of the society.
Right. And I the turmoil,
Western European society.
The turmoil that follows the years to come, I think, is part and parcel of why we don't get much of the rest of the music. Christianity is battling pagans internally, is battling the rise of Islam in the Middle East, which I said earlier, we're a few hundred years at this point removed from the First Crusade and the fall of the Byzantine Empire. So not much time to make music when
Right.
you're constantly defending yourself against people who want to proselytize you.
Yeah, I mean, when you're constantly at war, you know.
And then not much time to spend on teaching people.
Mhm.
So not many people, people were learning how to make bread or
the
blacksmiths,
necessities.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was going to school, and so, like you said, the monks were the only ones who knew how to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the culture centers of Christian Europe.
Right.
So naturally, what music that they make is going to become the prominent music of the time, which is just so unfortunate. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll cherry pick and find some really good ones, though.
I'm sure that there are some.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there are.
Would you recommend any of today's episode to a friend? The Oxyrhynchus hymn.
Yeah, I would recommend the Oxyrhynchus.
I think that should be required listening.
If you go to a Christian school, or if you
just
really care about
required
music,
listening.
yeah.
Every fifth grader should hear it.
They should at least know that it exists.
Mhm.
It is. I think it's.
It's 2 minutes out of your life. Sit
Right.
down and listen to this.
2 minutes, and it's almost 2,000 years old.
Yeah.
Have a listen. I would recommend that. And then, if there are any theoretical researchers out there listening, have yourself do an experiment on the St. Cosmos pieces. Let's see if there is any therapeutic quality to the chanting.
Christos o ergomenos emphanos Simon.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I'd be curious to know. But no, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody other than those that are curious enough.
Right.
So
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see what we get today. This episode was 200 to 300. Next
Yes.
episode is 300 to 400. We'll see what happens.
Stay tuned.